Welcome. I chose a purposefully provocative title, which is User Acquisition is Dead. And I did it specifically because A, I believe it, but B, I wanted to lay out the case for what that means, both to those of us who are business owners and those of us who are actually doing UA, and then how that transition will impact both the industry and those individuals. Oh, there's supposed to be a clicker. Thanks. All right, green button. All right, there we go. So just one slide at the beginning, one slide at the end, so you can have a little context on me and the company and what we're doing and why we're speaking. So we're a 6-year-old company. We've managed $1 billion in paid social. We focus specifically on Facebook and Google UAC. Around the rim are the companies that we are either currently or have worked with. Our particular focus is in mobile apps and games. And we really do 3 things. We offer a creative studio that will produce videos and images at scale, or fully managed UA acquisition where we'll do both creative and media buying, or also a platform. So in my good Disney training, I learned to begin with the end, but also I wanted to set some context. So this is kind of wrapping up the whole presentation, and then I'll go into the details. So Facebook and Google's, and I'm using AI and machine learning interchangeably. I know they're different, but it fits better with just AI. Their AI algorithms have radically simplified media buying over the course of the last 18 months. The more that AI is used, it really does drive incremental return on investment, both for companies and for the duopoly themselves. It also reduces the level of effort required to build and maintain those campaigns, which is both a good and a bad thing. Specifically, if you think about the intraday management of UA, user acquisition managers, UA managers, those levers are being removed with major updates. And removed means they go from the human being able to make decisions to the algorithm making decisions constantly. And as media buying is automated, that leaves an obvious opportunity, which is creative is the primary way in which you can drive performance if you're a mobile app, a game, or a lead generator looking to acquire consumers through one of these platforms. And the good news for all of us here is that AI and machine learning is terrible at doing creative. I'm sure they're working on it, but for now, there's a huge gap in capabilities. So I'm going to do 3 slides to just lay out the case on why I believe UA is dying. And for those who are actually doing buying, I hope this will make some good sense. And I'm going to try to limit the acronyms for you guys. On the left side of the screen is a relatively old strategy, so before 2018. And you were able to buy mobile app installs, MAI ads, from Facebook. And it was really quite complex. We would run thousands of simultaneous campaigns. The human beings would make 8 to 10 changes per ad set, per campaign. So lots of things to keep the human being busy. We were the ones picking audiences. We were the ones driving the quality. That flipped when Facebook introduced AEO, which is App Event Optimization. Consider that a purchase or a registration for those who are more familiar with that term. So it switched from buying volume to buying net profit. And then they went a little bit further, and a month or 2 later, and they introduced value. And the difference between value and event bidding is, do you want the payer who's going to give you 99 cents or $19.99? So you had, for the first time, the ability to really dial in net profit. That obviously comes at a cost. The person who's going to pay you $1,000 if you're a social casino is not the same person that's going to pay you 99 cents. So the cost per acquisition goes up a bunch. But campaigns dropped a ton, which means the humans had less to do. Facebook decided on the placements. They decided on the bids. They decided on the creation of the audiences. So as you can see, a chunk of what the human beings were doing got removed. Still a lot to do, but it got a little easier. My little clicker thing is dead. Next. All right, this is the next major significant change. This happened February 19th, 2018. Facebook introduced this thing that we call significant edits, they call best practices. And it's a fancy way of saying they introduced a penalty when you changed a bid more than 30% or a budget more than 40%. Why does that matter? Because for the first time, if you did hyper intraday changes, your performance dropped. And they call it learning phase and optimize phase. Learning phase means they're not really sure yet what to do with the ad. Optimize phase means it's dialed in, it's producing at optimal levels. If you tweak it and it drops back to the learning phase, oftentimes that's a 30 to 40% hit to your profitability. So when it's there, you really don't want to touch it. So as you can imagine, for those of us who had built very complex high-frequency trading platforms where we did lots of intraday changes, overnight it fundamentally stopped working. So it was pretty shocking. A couple other things happened is they wanted us to limit the amount of audience overlap, which meant unique ad sets targeted one audience. Anyway, the point here is February of last year was, I call it kind of the first death nail of tools. So they really took away the ability from third-party ad technology built specifically for doing bid automation. It made it much less valuable. Next, please. This is the one that's coming up. So September 2019, they have announced that campaign budget optimization, CBO, is mandatory. So what does that mean? Humans today make the change to determine which ad set is performing best. Is this group of ads more valuable or this group? I'll give the one that's more valuable more money. That is mandatory in September. Facebook will make those changes on your behalf so that they'll allow you to do kind of 24/7, 365 automation. So if you think about it, what's happening is Facebook's changing the bids, they're changing the budgets, the audiences, the placement, and the creative. So they're taking an awful lot of control from the humans, which, if you're running a game or a business, it's a good thing because it's getting more efficient. Next. So that's kind of the lead into why I believe UA is dead. And if you take it purely from the perspective of Google UAC, they built their system specifically to be automated. So they run the bids, they run the budgets, they run the placement, they even do the optimization of the creative. And they're about to get a lot more complex. In the second half of my presentation, which will be in the other room, I'm going to break down specifically what's launching in May and June, which is significant changes. And then if you look at Facebook, there's lots of kind of line items here with acronyms. The point is they had an awful lot of complexity in their algorithm, which gave a lot of control. And that control, my belief, is by Q1 of 2020 will be brought into this new kind of a tool. I'm going to call it Facebook UAC. I'm sure they have a different name. But if you look at the bottom, really the point of this slide is Google is going to get a lot more complex. So they're going to introduce ad groups and value bidding and similar audiences, et cetera, the things that we've talked about that Facebook is offering. And that's coming out in May, and they'll announce chunks of this at I/O, and the second part will be at the end of May. So huge changes coming to Google in terms of complexity. So Google's getting more complex. Facebook is getting substantially easier. So I think those two will kind of converge around Q1 of 2020. Next. So what happens if the machine does all the media buying? What happens to the human being that is currently sitting in the UA role? Well, as a business owner, you have an opportunity to hire less expensive people that are less trained. That also means that the ad tech fees that you're currently paying for doing bidding and buying and optimization of Facebook or Google will drop. And my belief is they'll drop to sub 1% of your spend with some kind of flat fee. So it's going to get substantially lower. Well, why would Facebook and Google do this? They're going to do it because they want to level the playing field between advertisers that are very big and very small. And if it's efficient for a very small advertiser to get the same level of return on investment that a large advertiser can get, more advertisers will come into the ecosystem. They don't have to increase the number of ads per page and then get more net efficiency out. So the human being here really has to focus on creative. And I think the problem is, it's a really true statement, this left brain, right brain thing, where the people today running UA are primarily math, stats, critical thinkers. The people doing video editing or ads today are creative folks. Very few people can bridge the gap between statistical analysis and creative development. So I think the UA folks have this opportunity to drive what what I call quantitative creative testing, which I'm going to show you in a moment, to really understand what the performance drivers are of ads. If you think of it like a super landing page, every ad should be broken down in this manner. And they'll be able to help teams become data-driven instead of brand-driven, which I think matters. And also develop a competitive analysis strategy so you can see what competitors are doing and how to take advantage of it. Can we switch? Next. So just to kind of recap, AI is simplifying buying. Humans have an opportunity to focus on creative. Next. Here's a challenge. So this is one of our gaming companies. Over 6 months, they spent $15 million in doing paid user acquisition. The horizontal axis is the number of ads that were tested. The vertical axis is how much was spent. So you can see a very few number of ads drove a majority of the spend. In fact, it's about 1 out of 20 ads create a new winner in the portfolio. If it doesn't win, you're not going to run it because you'd lose money running it. So the challenge is you've got to get an awful lot of creative into the system in order to test, to make sure you can unseat the best performer, because the best performer is going to die, and it dies relatively quickly. Good news again, you can't use a template, you can't use machine learning to do good creative. It's human being driven. Next. So we have this idea that if everything's going to bomb, like 95% of ads, why should they all be brand compliant? Can't you just do a prototype ad and go as quickly as you possibly can? And the idea is if you give the team a lot of creative freedom, you're going to find that they'll take more risks, they'll think outside the box, they'll move faster, and then don't noodle the losers. Be data-driven, let them die, and move on. And what that means tactically is it's around 25 to 50,000 impressions. The losers will express themselves, and then they'll fall off. So there really isn't much brand risk when you're running ads at this velocity because they're only out for a short amount of time. When you get a winner, sure, then you can make it brand compliant and test those changes. Next. This is a framework that we like to use. We call it quantitative creative testing. It's 4 steps. The basic philosophy here is it's 80-20 rule. 80% of the time you should be doing variations, 20% you should be doing concepts. The reasons are variations will help you keep your best performing ad alive a lot longer, and concepts are really hard to do. Next. So this first step is competitive analysis. Your competitors are failing at 95% rate too, so the best thing to do is to look at their ads to see how they're performing, take the best ideas and apply them to your app or service. The other best news is there's an endless supply of competitor videos that are currently running. You just have to know where to look. There's a new utility that Facebook launched. Can we go to the next page? And go ahead and play the video. It's called Facebook Ads Library. It's publicly available. The purpose of it is to bring a highlight to the political ads and who's running them. The kind of selfish benefit for us is any company currently advertising on Facebook, you can go to that URL and see all of the ads that they're currently running. What you're missing is the velocity of the ad, how many impressions, how many conversions, but you can get that through one of these other services down below to the left. So it really does help you see what competitors are doing, pick out those best ads. I think the challenge and opportunity is that you have to have the right human being doing that evaluation. Someone that understands these are the general themes of what is going on. Here's some big ideas that I can use and take and bring back into my world. It's not just these are pretty, right? There has to be more logic in it. Next. So I wanted to do something pretty basic because I'm using terms like concepts and variations. So I wanted to just show it. Can you hit play on the video? The idea here is change just one thing. And what you'll see is the only thing we're changing is the header. So we're removing the black font with the emoji and we're making it red. And in this particular example, that increased the performance by about 15%. Now the good news is if you're able to find these kind of sustained changes, you can keep the base concept alive for a long time. Next slide, and play the video. So this is an idea that we call it a concept refresh. And the basic idea, if you think of it like a letterbox, you can change anything in the middle, just keep the header the same and keep the footer the same. You know those two elements work well because we've A/B tested them. So now you can flip out the middle of the content knowing you have a high propensity of success because you've kept two of the key elements exactly the same. The third element is the variable. If you change more than one thing at a time, you'll be unable to measure the impact, so you're not going to know what drove the success or the failure. So unfortunately, this is a lot like a landing page. The more you change, the cloudier the data. In the second half of the presentation, we're going to talk about statistical relevance. People like that, but it's super expensive, and we don't advise to run your ads to statistical relevance, and we'll show you how to do it. So run them for as little data as you can before you kill them. Next. So I love Battleship. This is one of those things where like you can randomly guess B12 or whatever it is, or you can take an approach which says, methodically, I am going to tear apart these individual pieces of an ad, and I'm going to treat them just like I would any landing page. So I'm going to test the header, the copy, the placement, the length, the whether or not I include a logo, the start cards, the end cards. I mean, there's a ton just on this page that you can add to an existing winner to keep it alive. And just as a kind of takeaway nugget, never put the App Store or Google Play logos on your ads, ever. It's a 15% decrement to performance, and they don't need the help. Next. So this is what everybody wants, right? They want you to walk out into a rainstorm, have this creative vision, and capture lightning in a bottle. The reality is, us, anybody, your internal teams, are going to fail 95% of the time. So if you're going to keep failing, start with your competitor ads. Can you hit play on the video? Focus on the emotion, and this is the hard part for game companies. Not the brand, not the gameplay, not the assets. In the Matchington ads below, a majority of what you see has no relation to the game whatsoever. They're just funny and interesting and playful, and as you may know, they're #1 in the App Store for Match 3. So they've done a good job, and we've helped them get there using this tactic. It's strange that you can have completely unrelated ad and experience and actually drive high payers, but it does work quite well. Next slide. So kind of bringing closer to this, whether it's us or any other company, I think there's some interesting benefits here, which is one of the challenges we constantly hear from internal teams is tunnel vision. My creative team knows what works, and they get stuck because they don't want to go outside of the box because the failure rate is so massive, they get fatigued by creating a bunch of stuff that just bombs. So if you work with an external company, it validates the performance of the internal team, so you can share it to the execs and see how they're doing. It increases intensity, which is fantastic. If you find the right partner, all the winners and all the losers are documented, so as new employees come on or new partners come on, it's kind of a Rosetta Stone on what to do next. On the creative side, it really does help eliminate this concept of tunnel vision because the number of creatives are going to increase. But I think more importantly, we as a company don't know the issues that you have run into. We haven't hit those walls yet, so we're going to think very differently, which is great. And then when we get a winner, we give it to you, and your internal team creates variations. On the UA side, we have multiple companies. We work with Jam City and Glue and Ubisoft and a bunch of guys. They'll give us 30 to 40% of their budget, and this is kind of a typical structure for a marketing partner, Facebook or Google. Which means their internal team keeps a majority of the budget. And if we get a winner, they give it to us. If they get a winner, well, we give it to them, that kind of thing, so there's an exchange. But also, if during the week we perform better on a 7-day net ROAS, we get more budget. If they perform better, they take budget back. So it's a sliding scale that keeps the intensity really high. We also have an advantage, which is we don't look at one app or 10 apps. We're looking at many because we're working broadly across the industry, so we can see test buckets and funkiness going on in these marketplaces. Next. I'm just going to leave this on for a second. This is how you can work with us. All of our pricing is publicly available. It's kind of this radical transparency approach we take. So 3 things: Creative Studio, Managed Services, and the platform. A note that I'm pretty proud of is we've competed against both Facebook and Google marketing partners. We've never lost. We're 60-0. I'm sure we will lose. We haven't yet. Next slide. So that's it. Questions? 24 seconds. All right. So if you're interested in hearing what Google is doing next, how to run testing, I'm going to run over to the other stage. Thank you very much for your time.